It's still snowing outside. It's going to snow all week and all weekend. And there's no way to go anywhere safely. So here I am again in my basement. So I'm going to sew these blocks together today. I wanted to make it into a reasonable size, and the bird blocks turned out to be about 11 inches by 15 inches, give or take a few bits. So I have arranged them 4 down and 3 across. But 4 down makes 60 inches, which is a good size for a small quilt. But 3 across, 11, 11, 11, 33, is not quite wide enough. So I had some of these orphan blocks in my stash. So I just decided they're gray and white. I'll just put a row in each section and voila, now they're going to be 40 inches across and 60 inches down. So everything's golden here. Everything's golden. Except outside, it's all white. What have I been doing? I haven't been doing a whole lot of sewing recently. You know, I came back from my holiday, which was lovely, and then kind of had to sort things out for a while. And didn't really have to go anywhere. But I did have some surgery. So that slowed me down quite a bit. It's just on my neck here. Something had to come out of my neck. So it's been uncomfortable, and I haven't been doing a whole lot for the last couple of days. So I'm feeling a bit better today, so I'm going to make a stab at sewing these things together. I really like the way the selvages made really good legs for those birds. And that was a treat, using some of these selvages. I've got to find some more ways to use these selvages. I've done things with them before, made whole bags just using selvages. And I put selvages into projects whenever I could find a way to put them in, because they're kind of interesting and they add a lot of interest. So my thing about after I get everything pieced, I like to clean off my desk. So I've got a strip of this left, and I've got a few little bits of these things left. And I've got little bits of the color blocks. Not very much though, not very much. So the first thing I generally do when I'm cleaning off my desk is to use my small ruler and cut these things into squares. And if they're not 2.5 inches, then if I can get a strip, I will use it as a strip. But this project really had very little waste. I'm very surprised there was not very much that I had as cutoffs. So it's been a really nice project. I have to decide what I'm going to do with the backing. I have a piece of fabric I could use for the back, but I'm going to sew it all together in one piece. It's 40 by 60. It's not going to take a lot of time and effort to quilt it. So what am I going to do first? I guess I'll just start sewing the rows together. And that will be what I start with. just getting things sorted. Now, what do I do to sew the rows together? First thing, when I sewed the gray strips, the pieced gray strips, where are they? Here, there, like that. They're a little bit longer than the block is. So I'm going to stagger the angles of that so that there's sort of half up and half down, not sort of straight across the bottom. You'll see. I'm just going to bring the top row over and I'll start putting the top row together. Sometimes when I'm sewing, I find that my blocks are not perfectly the same size. The part up here might be a little bit lower or higher than the one next to it. So it's always a bit of a gamble as to how you put them together to make them look like they belong together and that it's not just a conglomeration of things that you didn't really think you were doing, but there you've got it. So I think I'm going to start with this strip. Now I said it was longer because it came to me as orphan blocks, and look at how wonderful this person has pressed all of those seams at the back. I'm just amazed that those blocks have all of those little turned out quarters back here. And she left them in my front porch. I don't know who made them. But there we go. That's the way it goes around this place sometimes. When I'm looking at this on the table and I want to sew these together, I use my guide on the table quite a bit for piecing things because my blocks are not always uniform in size. Let's face it, I don't sew for accuracy. I sew for fun. So what I'm going to do is this top square, I'm going to halfway at the top, and then at the bottom it will be halfway at the bottom too. Because if I start it right at the end, down here, it's going to be at a seam, but because these are put together in such a fashion, I don't want to have to take apart one row and start it, because it is certainly going to be a worse problem than just cutting something in half. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. It's a way of making it work. And halfway between one block and the next block is going to be my top part right there. Start there, and when I get to the bottom, it will also be about halfway between a block. And that way I can hide the fact that I'm going to cut these off. That's what I have to do. So I'm just going to pin the top and the bottom so it stays in the place where I want it. I'll sew the top row together. Then I have to make sure that the bottom of it is going to be straight so I can join the next row to it. For this, I'm going to turn it over though, because I want to keep all of these seam allowances lying in the same orientation they're at now. Top, I'll just trim it off across here. Likewise at the bottom. Now just sew this last piece on. I'm just butting them up together and sewing them because I don't want anything in between those. I just had to add a spacer over here. So I'm just going to continue. I trim off the little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom, and I will go on to the next row and do the same thing. It's just a matter of timing, precision, put them together. Here's the next row. Again, I did halfway through the block, top and bottom. It makes it seem more uniform for me. So that's what I'm doing. And I just keep sewing the rows together until the rows are completed. Then I can stitch the rows together. So here's a couple of tips. When you start doing some kind of improvisational block, you have to think about your background fabric. I had these gray and white blocks, and I spent a great deal of time selecting a color of fabric for the background. And when you are looking at things, don't get conned by people saying, oh, black and gray don't mix with brown. I think the color I chose for the background accentuates the fact that the blocks are gray and white, and it also allows for the colors to shine of the front part, the breast part of the bird. The second thing, make sure you have some kind of an idea in your mind how big you want to make it when you start. This piece of fabric that I used for the background was only about 1.5 meters of fabric. And when I started, I didn't know how much I would want to make and how big the blocks were going to be and how I wanted them to look. But I thought I wanted to make some of the birds on this fabric because I like the color combination. And as it turns out, I have this much left over. But when I was starting, I thought I need to find some more of this fabric at the store. And I went back to the store, there was none of it left. And I did buy a piece of fabric like this. It's not bad. It would have made blocks, and I thought at one point that I would make baby birds and put the baby birds on this fabric and the adult birds on this one. And that would make them different. But I haven't needed to use this piece at all. And I bought another 1.5 meters, so I've got a piece of fabric now that I didn't have before. But I could use it on the back. And that's probably what I'll do. So if you're making something and you want a consistent background, you have to really think hard about how much fabric you have and will it be enough? Because, you could go back to the store where you got it and there's none left. You could look at other stores, you could drive around, you could look everywhere, you could ask your friends, but you'll never find the piece that you want. Sometimes I'm lucky, but not all the time. So you have to have some kind of a secondary plan for background fabric if you are thinking of making something. When I start something, I never know what it's going to turn out like. I have sort of an idea. I might have an idea how much fabric it's going to take. And honestly, this pattern has very little wasted fabric. I cut the squares for the triangles on the back, and the rest of it was just strips of 3-inch fabric to go along for the bottom, the top, and down where the beak is. So it really did not have wasted fabric. I have very few little pieces left of what I have as cutoffs. This was just one of them, but that's basically all I have that's cut off that hasn't been used. So, have a good eye for how much fabric you think you might make and what size you want to make. Right now, I'm just sort of having fun making small quilts to donate to charities. And they allow me to use up a lot of my scrap fabrics that I've got, a lot of orphan blocks that I've got. I could make placemats, I could make all kinds of small projects, but I'd rather make a quilt that is going to comfort somebody and keep them warm. So try to envision what you want when you start. When I made this quilt over here, the house one, I just had 4 houses that I made as a whim one day. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with it at all. But turns out I really like this quilt too. And it was just a matter of manipulating a few scraps around and a few bits pieces, and you have um, colors that repeat themselves. The reds in the middle came out in the reds around the houses, around the outside. The blue and black were in the middle, and so they were around the outside too. So, you use combinations of colors and you make them repeat. Be careful of the quilt police. They might tell you brown doesn't go with gray. If you like it, make it and have a good time with it. I like the combination. The birds stand out proudly against the brown background. The colors that are in the print, there's this green and red and pink. They look really nice with the bird colors. And now I'm just going to make some batting pieces and backing pieces for that and get it quilted. Well, here's how I'm quilting it. I'm just using a free motion stitch and doing a curvy ribbon-like uh, free motion stitching in the bird body. I have my white thread on for the bird bodies and for the pieces of gray and white fabric. And I did the same kind of ribbon effect of free motion stitching. And in the main part of the background fabric, I just meandered, but I had a variegated colored thread that was kind of brown and orange and red and blue and green. And I think it had a little bit of shine to it as well. And I like the way it stands out, and especially on the back side because I used the same thread on the back side because I did use that extra piece of fabric I bought for the backing. Looks good too. So when you do free motion stitching, you just have to make sure that you keep a consistent speed and try to make the stitches a uniform size. Both hands on the sides of the foot that you're using. I usually wear gloves because that gives me a little bit more stability. And also, you just move it gently back and forth, no jerky movements. It's quite easy to do on something small like this 40 by 60 inch piece of fabric. So, just finishing this off, I'll bind it and hang it on the wall, and here it is. And used up a lot of blocks that were all orphan blocks. Like the backs of the birds were all orphan blocks. The front of the birds were different orphan blocks, and these strips down between were other orphan blocks that people had donated to my stash. And the only thing I provided was the brown fabric around the outside. And I think it's a very cute quilt. I like it a lot. It's taken me a while to do it because, oh, we've had so much snow here. We've just had so much snow. And this is the first day in 2 weeks that I haven't had to move snow. I am just so tired of having all this snow. Oh. Anyway, I'm very pleased with this. I'll do a few close-ups so you can see some of the free motion stitching that I did because it's dark thread on dark fabric and really it doesn't show up very well from a distance. The backing is all a solid piece. It's that other piece I bought that I thought I might need for the front, but I didn't. So it is the back and it is the binding around the outside. So everything's jolly. It's all used up and it's really nice that it's finished. But since the beginning of January, I have made two very different baby quilts, lap quilts, size 40 by 60 inches, primarily made from orphan blocks and with very little other fabric, just the background that I used to make a uniform kind of quilt. And I think both of them are very lovely. I think I'm going to put them away. I have 4 grandsons. They're all late teens and into the mid 20s now, and they've got girlfriends, and sooner or later there's going to be great grandchildren coming along. So I think I should start preparing for that, put a few of these things away. Anyway, until next time, now I've got to just decide what I'm going to do next time. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to make next, but I have a lot of cut squares, and I have a lot of little strippy bits, so it might be something that's really quite scrappy. Anyway, enjoy your last month of winter wherever you are. I'm going to try to enjoy it, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.